Another thrilling zombie movie is here. The story begins. Hibiki is a car mechanic. On this day, as usual, he rides his motorcycle to work. However, on the way, he encounters a tunnel collapse and ends up trapped inside for 4 days. During this time, he survives solely on a packed lunch he happened to have with him. When he escaped from the tunnel, he found that the world had turned into an apocalyptic scene. Trash and bloodstains were scattered everywhere on the ground, and the streets were completely deserted. The world has changed. Hibiki is stunned. The transportation system has collapsed, and all communication signals are down. What on earth happened during those 4 days? Hibiki returns to his workplace, the auto repair shop, only to find his boss's wife lying lifeless. Her terrifyingly distorted face causes Hibiki to fall to the ground in fear. Suddenly, he hears the sound of chewing coming from behind the iron door. Curious, Hibiki walks over and sees his boss feasting on a young, beautiful woman. Hearing Hibiki's voice, the boss drops the woman and slowly stands up, turning his head to reveal a grotesque, menacing expression. The boss lunges at Hibiki, attempting to bite him. However, Hibiki manages to break free and quickly shuts the iron door, trapping the boss inside. But just then, infected coworkers also come charging at him. Hibiki has no choice but to run for his life. He hurriedly climbs into a small truck. As zombies surround him, Hibiki finally starts the engine and shakes them all off. When he arrives home, he doesn't find his girlfriend anywhere. Hibiki was very worried about his girlfriend's safety. He frantically searches a drawer and finds the engagement ring still there. He had planned to propose to her tonight, but who could have predicted this would happen? He steps outside, hoping to find someone who can help. However, the noise draws several zombies toward him. Fortunately, these zombies move slowly, giving Hibiki enough time to escape. A delivery guy on the second floor shouts directions to Hibiki, guiding him into the building. Just as he climbs in, someone grabs him and checks if he's been bitten by the zombies. To Hibiki's surprise, the person turns out to be his high school classmate, Hiro, who is now a police officer. 2 other men then appear. One of them is Daiki, Hiro's superior, and the other is Shinji, the delivery guy who helped Hibiki earlier. After confirming that Hibiki hasn't been bitten, they lead him to another room where several people have already gathered. Hibiki learns that during the 4 days he was trapped, a zombie virus outbreak occurred. Anyone bitten by a zombie turns into one themselves. The cause of the outbreak remains unknown. Initially, a rescue team was supposed to come to their area, but all contact with them was suddenly lost. Since Shinji is familiar with the local shortcuts, he decides to head to the nearest shelter to seek help and bring back the rescue team. He promises to return soon. However, when night falls and Shinji still hasn't returned, everyone grows increasingly anxious. Hibiki suggests going to check on him, but Daiki stops him. Daiki insists they cannot afford to split up further. If the rescue team doesn't arrive by tomorrow, they will all go to the shelter together. Masaomi, however, believes they should stay and wait for rescue. Yohei argues that it's the police's duty to handle the situation and insists that they should be the ones to take the risk. The disagreement nearly escalates into a fight, but in the end, they decide to head to the shelter together during daylight. That way, their chances of survival will be higher. As night fell, the zombies became more active, furiously pushing against the main door from outside. The group hurried to brace it with all their strength. It turned out someone had bled earlier, and the scent of blood had attracted the zombies to their location. They struggled through the night, barely holding on until the zombies finally retreated at dawn. By morning, the group prepared to set out. They walked from morning until dusk, finally reaching the shelter, only to find it in complete chaos. The shelter was a temporary setup in a hospital, but now it was filled with corpses. Hibiki was startled by the bodies, but after a while, he noticed no movement. While searching the area, Hibiki found his girlfriend Kurumi's clothes and ID badge. Kurumi was an intern doctor, and her fate was uncertain, but Hibiki was convinced she was still alive. That night, the group rested in one of the rooms. Kane, however, went to use the restroom and was distracted by a strange noise. Driven by curiosity, she slowly walked toward it. A large group of zombies erupted into chaos. While zombies moved slowly during the day, they became alarmingly swift at night. They charged in Kane's direction. Kane started running for her life, heading towards the room where her companions were, shouting for help as she ran. Everyone scattered, running in different directions. Just as Kane was about to be caught by the zombies, Hibiki fired an arrow that saved her. Minjun, skilled in martial arts, kicked down several zombies to buy his teammates time. The group successfully retreated into a room and barricaded the door. Meanwhile, a mother and her child fled into the restroom in a panic. As more zombies gathered outside, the bathroom door began to give way. Shoko, the mother, told her daughter to jump out of the window and escape. It was unclear how much time had passed when Daiki finally killed the last zombie and saved Shoko. Meanwhile, Yuzuki was in danger. During her escape, Yuzuki's clothes got caught on an iron hook, and zombies were rapidly closing in on her. Just in the nick of time, Hibiki arrived and immediately drew his bow, shooting arrows to kill the zombies. At that moment, another zombie charged at them. Hibiki froze. It was Shinji, the delivery man who had gone to seek help. No wonder he hadn't returned. With an apologetic murmur, Hibiki loosed an arrow, putting Shinji down. Yuzuki was finally safe. The group endured another harrowing night. The next day, they managed to tune the radio and suddenly heard a distress call. It was from none other than Hibiki's girlfriend, Kurumi. Unfortunately, just as she relayed her location, the signal cut out. Kurumi was trapped in a bus surrounded by zombies. After a long and arduous search, Hibiki finally found the bus, only to discover it was empty. Daiki noticed spent bullet casings on the ground and concluded that the people in the bus had been rescued by the military. They were likely being transported to a military base. In truth, this was exactly what had happened. Hibiki and his group decided to head to the military base as well. However, Masaomi's expression became increasingly tense. It turned out Masaomi had been infected. Yohei discovered this when he approached him. It's possible that Yohei pushed Masaomi last night, and feeling guilty, he didn't tell Daiki that Masaomi had been infected. While Hibiki was repairing the car, Masaomi stared at him, salivating. Before finally collapsing, Hiro checked on him and realized Masaomi had been bitten. At the same time, a large horde of zombies appeared in the distance. Forced to abandon the vehicle, the group retreated into a building, bringing Masaomi with them. To prevent any incidents, Hiro tied Masaomi up. Minjun revealed that his sister was working with the military to develop a vaccine. If they could reach the military base, they might be able to cure Masaomi, but it was clear that Masaomi didn't have much time left. Suddenly, Masaomi began to mutate and screamed in agony. His cries attracted even more zombies. Strangely, Masaomi regained his composure soon after. Hiro decided to kill Masaomi. He pulled out a small knife, but Hibiki stepped in front of him, blocking his way to stop him. When the zombies broke in, Hibiki even carried Masaomi on his back, risking his own life. Masaomi was moved by Hibiki's determination. He told the others to drag Hibiki away. Knowing his time was almost up, Masaomi stayed behind to hold off the zombies. He secured the iron door. Masaomi's self-sacrifice bought the group precious time to escape. Everyone who witnessed his actions was deeply moved by his bravery. After escaping, Hibiki remained shaken for a long time, but life had to move forward. Daiki and Yohei returned with fuel and successfully rejoined the group. Together, they prepared to head to the military base. After a long and exhausting journey, they finally reached the military base. Cheers erupted as they celebrated. Daiki stepped forward and waved, but a gunshot rang out, and Daiki was shot dead. In the apocalypse, the scariest thing isn't the zombies, it's other humans. The sudden turn of events left everyone in shock. As soldiers rushed out toward them, the group had no choice but to leave Daiki's body behind and flee. Hibiki and the others hid in a stack of shipping containers for 3 days. A grieving Hiro eventually regained his composure. They had no idea why the soldiers had opened fire on them, but in a world like this, some people had already lost their humanity. They decided to move on to another shelter. Kane was the last to get up. Just then, a slow-moving zombie approached her, scaring her out of her wits. Frightened, she stabbed the zombie in the neck, but the zombie didn't go down. Thankfully, Hibiki noticed and rushed over, tackling the zombie and stabbing it in the forehead. Only then did it finally collapse. The others returned at that moment. Seeing that the zombie was dead, they all breathed a sigh of relief. The group resumed their journey. As night fell, they came across a large building and decided to spend the night there. Cautiously, they entered the building and found it to be messy and unkempt. To prepare for any sudden threats, Hibiki took the lead, ready to act at any moment. Suddenly, a loud scream echoed, and a woman with a knife charged toward them. It seemed the woman had mistaken Hibiki for a zombie. Hibiki quickly stopped her and explained he wasn't a monster. The woman finally relaxed and fainted. The group realized the woman was none other than the famous actress Mia. After saving her, they welcomed her into their group and let their guard down. They rested for the night, but trouble came the next day. A group of people approached from the distance, led by a man named Suboy, who claimed the building was his territory. It turned out Suboy had been watching them since they first entered the building. They captured Kane and forced Hiro to hand over his gun, threatening to decapitate her if he refused. Hiro, of course, refused but negotiated to exchange the gun for Kane the next day. Suboy, holding a hostage, wasn't worried at all about any tricks they might have up their sleeves, so he agreed to the deal. Despite racking their brains all night, Hibiki and the group couldn't come up with a viable plan. The next day, at the agreed meeting time, only Hiro, Minjun, and Yohei showed up. Hibiki was nowhere to be seen. On Suboy's side, most of his men were present. Suboy's men surrounded Hiro and his group, demanding they hand over their weapon. Hiro requires simultaneous transactions, but Haru immediately placed a knife against Kane's neck. Hiro had no choice but to give in. He threw the gun and bullets to them. As Hiro approached Kane, Suboy suddenly stopped him, saying, "Do you think I'm stupid? Where's the missing member of your group?" As soon as he finished speaking, Hibiki appeared with a bow and arrow. Suboy immediately aimed his gun at Hibiki, but Minjun also pulled out a gun and aimed it at Suboy. It turned out Hibiki's group had two guns. The second one belonged to the late Daiki. Despite having a gun to his head, Suboy remained unfazed. Just as the standoff intensified, Mia appeared, holding Yuzuki hostage. It turned out Mia had been planted by Suboy from the beginning. This was his trump card. Hibiki's group had trusted her, only to be betrayed. Shoko was also captured and tied up. Hibiki and the others had no choice but to surrender their weapons. They couldn't risk Yuzuki's life. They were then locked in a basement. The basement was filled with zombies. It seemed Suboy had somehow managed to contain all the zombies in the building within this area. No wonder the rest of the building was zombie-free. Suboy locked Hibiki's group in a cage next to the zombies and tied them to pillars. However, Haru approached Suboy and whispered that a sudden power outage had caused an elevator malfunction, trapping some of their men inside. None of them knew how to fix the generator. Sensing an opportunity, Hibiki stepped forward and offered to repair it. Suboy sent two men to escort Hibiki and warned them to kill him if he tried to escape. After inspecting the generator, Hibiki found the issue wasn't complicated and quickly fixed it. One of Suboy's men came up to inspect it. The next second, as Hibiki was climbing over the fence, his necklace got caught, forcing him to jump back down. Unfortunately, the necklace and the ring fell to the other side. That ring was meant for his proposal to Kurumi. Just then, a little girl picked up the ring. The girl innocently asked, "Are you playing hide and seek?" Hibiki didn't have time to answer as he heard footsteps approaching. He had no choice but to abandon the ring and run back. Hibiki could have escaped on his own, but he was determined to bring his companions along. The coincidence was that he ran into Suboy, but Hibiki was not scared at all. During his escape, Hibiki encountered some of Suboy's followers. They were ordinary people who trusted Suboy completely. Hibiki realized that Suboy might not be as bad as he seemed. The reason he had robbed Hibiki and his group was to protect these people. He pleaded with Suboy to gather everyone and head to the Yokohama safe zone together. Hibiki's sincerity moved Suboy, and he slowly lowered his gun, but Suboy still remarked that Hibiki was too naive. Suddenly, Haru arrived with urgent news. The military had shown up. It turned out that an hour earlier, Suboy had captured Kurumi, who was out collecting samples. Neither side knew about the other's existence. When the military received the news, the commander ordered a rescue mission to save the hostages and eliminate the terrorists. Suboy didn't have time to deal with Hibiki. He rushed to the room where everyone was gathered and began organizing an orderly retreat. Although Kurumi urged everyone to surrender, promising to explain the situation, Suboy didn't trust the military. Meanwhile, Haru went to the basement and released the zombies in the cage, hoping to use them to slow down the advancing military. The zombies soon clashed with the military. At the sound of an order, a barrage of bullets rained down on the horde of zombies. As Suboy and his group made their escape, Kurumi noticed the ring around the little girl's neck. The ring had her name engraved on it. It was the ring Hibiki had planned to propose with. The little girl returned the ring to Kurumi, saying it belonged to a big brother who had dropped it. Ignoring Suboy's obstruction, she ran back, searching for Hibiki. At that moment, Hibiki was on his way to rescue his companions when he encountered a zombie tied up in a restroom. As he prepared to kill it, Mia rushed in and stopped him. The zombie was Mia's boyfriend. Even though he had turned into a zombie, Mia still loved him. Mia also revealed a secret to Hibiki. Zombies were afraid of fire. Hibiki made his way to the basement. Just when everyone thought he had abandoned them, a flaming torch fell from above, driving the zombies back. With Hibiki's help, the group managed to escape. As they got out, Hibiki thought he heard Kurumi calling his name, but the path back had already been blocked by zombies, and he had no choice but to give up. Kurumi, however, was found by the military and successfully rescued. After escaping, Hibiki had a falling out with Hiro. Their relationship became strained, and Hiro ultimately decided to leave the group. Since Hibiki had saved everyone, the group chose to trust him. As Hiro passed by a message board, he saw a note left by Kurumi that read, "Hibiki, I'm at the military base." After hesitating for a moment, Hiro tore down the note. Hibiki led the group to a shipyard, which seemed clean and free of zombies. They decided to spend the night there. At that moment, Yuzuki's asthma flared up, and there was no asthma medication left. Hibiki and Minjun decided to go out and search for more medication. They left immediately, hoping to return before nightfall, carefully avoiding zombies along the way. They suddenly spotted 3 survivors. Hibiki didn't hesitate to help them escape the danger. 2 of the survivors introduced themselves as journalists from Yokohama. Outside the quarantine zone, Hibiki, excited, asked if Yokohama was safe. The man confirmed it was, but expressed his shock at the state of the quarantine zone. A man in black suddenly spoke up. He was searching for his wife and daughter. Hibiki looked at the photo he was handed and realized it was Shoko and her daughter. What a coincidence. Hibiki drew a map for the man, Satoshi, so he could find them. He and Minjun had to continue their search for Yuzuki's asthma medication. The remaining 2 reporters, eager to get an exclusive story, decided to follow Hibiki and Minjun. They found a hospital, but outside, a few zombies were wandering around. Hibiki told the reporters to stay in a safe spot while he and Minjun broke a window and entered the hospital. When Hibiki and Minjun retrieved the medication and ran back out, they discovered the 2 journalists had been bitten and killed by zombies. During their escape, they accidentally ran into a group of zombies. They quickly sprinted and hid behind a rolling shutter. After much effort, Hibiki and Minjun finally returned to the ship. Yuzuki, having taken the medicine, felt better. Just as Hibiki was lost in thought, he was called to the ship's cabin. Satoshi had been bitten. Upon inquiry, it was revealed that Shoko had deliberately led Satoshi onto a ship full of zombies. It turned out that Satoshi was an abusive man. When they first arrived, he acted kindly, but once Yohei and Kene left, Satoshi revealed his true nature, throwing things, insulting Shoko and her daughter. Shoko, having had enough, decided to take action, which led to the situation. Hibiki was shocked by the news. In this post-apocalyptic world, it was hard to tell who was right or wrong. The next day, the group prepared to head to the Yokohama shelter. Hibiki also wants to take the bound Satoshi with him. However, Satoshi pulled out a knife and attacked Hibiki. At that moment, Hibiki transformed from his previous indecisiveness into someone decisive and ruthless. He strangled Satoshi to death and simply told the group that Satoshi had turned into a zombie. The others didn't check and just accepted it. After a long journey, they finally arrived in Yokohama, excited to wave at the quarantine line, but suddenly, they stopped smiling. The virus had spread beyond the quarantine zone. Their last hope, the safe zone, had already been overrun by zombies. On Hibiki's suggestion, they decided to go against the odds and head to the military base instead. To avoid the zombies, they chose to travel by boat. However, halfway through the journey, they realized they were out of fuel. Yohei blamed Hibiki for not checking the fuel tank before starting, but at that moment, nothing could be done. Luckily, they spotted a small island ahead. With the current, their boat drifted to shore. It was Sarushima, a tourist destination before the apocalypse. Now, they had no idea what awaited them on the island. As they approached a building, Hibiki noticed something. Upon closer inspection, they realized a group of people was already there, busy with something. The group noticed them and immediately raised their weapons in defense. To their surprise, it was Suboy and his crew. Since Suboy had arrived first, Hibiki asked if they could spare a small area for his group, promising not to cause any trouble. Suboy was reluctant. They had encountered zombies on the way here, and now they were down to just these few companions. Just then, Haru rushed over, calling out that one of their members was on the verge of death. Medicine was in short supply, so Hibiki offered to go with Suboy to the military base to get some. Despite the danger, Suboy agreed. Knowing Hibiki was capable, they settled Hibiki's group in a small room and prepared to leave the next day for the military base. The following day, they selected a group of people to go. Since the military considered them terrorists, they had to sneak in from the sea and enter quietly. When they arrived at the shore, Yohei, afraid, refused to go. He decided to stay on the boat to protect it, and Hibiki didn't insist. The rest of the group proceeded. Suboy led them to an iron gate, cut through the barbed wire, and opened a hidden bunker. According to reliable information, this bunker would lead directly to the military base. Before entering, they divided the tasks: find the medicine, and if possible, weapons. If they hadn't returned by sunset, they would leave without waiting. Suboy took the lead, and Hibiki followed closely behind. After successfully infiltrating the base, Hibiki, Minjun, and Kane decided to search for medicine together. As soldiers occasionally passed by the hallways, their movement was difficult, so they decided to split up. Suboy and his group had already found the medicine, but just as he was about to search for weapons, he suddenly felt a bad premonition and decided to retreat early. Meanwhile, Hibiki and Kane found the medicine, but as they were leaving, Hibiki's head buzzed. It was Kurumi, his girlfriend. She seemed to be unconscious. Just as he was about to check, someone suddenly grabbed her and carried her away. Hibiki didn't have time to think. All he wanted was to save Kurumi. He quickly handed the medicine to Kane and told her to go back while he pursued Kurumi. He ran into a pitch-black room, and just as he grabbed Kurumi's hand, he was knocked unconscious with a stick. At that moment, Kane successfully escaped through the bunker. Upon learning that Hibiki was still at the military base, everyone waited for him. However, when the promised time of sunset arrived and Hibiki had not returned, Suboy and the others decided not to wait any longer. Kane handed the medicine to Suboy, and she prepared to head back with Minjun to find Hibiki. Touched by their loyalty, Suboy handed them each a knife and walked away without looking back. Meanwhile, Hibiki slowly regained consciousness at the military base, surprised to find himself tied up, surrounded by zombies. At that moment, someone spoke. Hibiki turned to see it was Professor Shudo. Hibiki recognized Shudo as the attending physician who had treated his mother when she was ill. But later, his mother unfortunately passed away, so he clearly remembered Shudo. Shudo also remembered Hibiki. As Kurumi's superior, he knew Hibiki was Kurumi's boyfriend. In order to keep Hibiki away from Kurumi, Shudo had been lying to her, telling her that Hibiki was dead. That's why, when Hibiki first arrived at the base, Shudo had set up the ambush to drive them away. It was Shudo who had been responsible for the shot that killed Daiki. This revelation filled Hibiki with hatred toward Shudo. Suddenly, the power was cut. Shudo assumed Hibiki's companions had abandoned him and fled, but to his surprise, they had returned to rescue Hibiki. The equipment used to study the virus required power, and for Shudo, research was more important than anything else. So, he left Hibiki behind and hurried off to activate the backup generator. Before leaving, Shudo released a zombie to take care of Hibiki. As the zombie approached, Hibiki fell backward, using his legs to keep it from pouncing. But soon, he ran out of strength. Just as the zombie was about to bite him, Minjun and Kane arrived just in time. Minjun stabbed the zombie in the head, saving Hibiki. However, Hibiki still decided to go after Kurumi. Kane, who had developed feelings for Hibiki, desperately tried to stop him, but Hibiki walked away without looking back. While searching for Kurumi, Hibiki sneaked into a room and was startled when he saw a zombie. Upon closer inspection, the zombie looked extremely familiar. Hibiki stared in disbelief at the zombie, muttering, "Mom?" The zombie looked exactly like Hibiki's mother, but his mother had passed away when he was just a child. Shocked, Hibiki tried to leave, but something compelled him to open the door and walk closer to the familiar face. It was her. It was his mother. Hibiki fell to his knees, unable to bear seeing his mother suffer. He grabbed an axe and freed her, but his mother had already turned into a zombie. She struggled to bite Hibiki. To avoid being bitten, Hibiki stumbled away, falling repeatedly as he fled. His heart ached with pain. He wanted to go back and save his mother. Just then, a man arrived. Omazaki, one of Tsuboy's people who lived on the island, saw Hibiki in a state of emotional turmoil and quickly injected him with a tranquilizer, which calmed him down. What Hibiki didn't know was that the zombie he had released would soon claim Minjun's life. Minjun and Kane were still waiting for Hibiki when the zombie suddenly appeared around the corner. Kane couldn't hold off the zombie, and Minjun came to her aid. Though he managed to kill the zombie with one strike, he was bitten on the wrist in the process. Back on the island, Hibiki finally woke up. Omazaki, after a fierce internal struggle, chose to reveal Shudo's secret. It turned out that he had once been one of Shudo's research assistants. He had been involved in the case of Hibiki's mother. Hibiki's mother had participated in a clinical trial that claimed to be gene therapy. However, it was actually an illegal medical experiment, and the virus injected into her had turned her into a zombie. This virus had been developed by Shudo. and he had used it on patients without permission. Whether the virus spread naturally or was caused by humans, Omazaki didn't know. It was at that moment that Hibiki learned the truth about his mother's death. She had been used as an experimental subject by Shudo. Later that evening, Minjun found Hibiki and apologized, saying he had just realized that the person he had killed was Hibiki's mother, but before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly collapsed. Hibiki then discovered that Minjun had been bitten. Overwhelmed with guilt, Hibiki realized Minjun had been injured while trying to save him. Minjun knew he couldn't hold on much longer, and he wanted to see the sunset one last time. The group helped Minjun to the beach. As they watched the breathtaking sunset, Minjun took one last photo. He hoped Hibiki would give it to his sister. After saying this, he closed his eyes. Minjun then transformed into a zombie, struggling violently to bite anyone. The group held him down tightly, their faces filled with tears. Though it pained him, Hibiki made the difficult decision to end Minjun's life with a single, merciful strike. They stayed there until nightfall, and Hibiki couldn't shake the feeling that Minjun's death was his fault. If he hadn't been so focused on chasing after Kurumi, Minjun might still be alive. He tried to convince himself that everything he saw was just a hallucination of Kurumi, and ultimately, Hibiki chose to forget her. They buried Minjun and scattered flower seeds over his grave, so he wouldn't be alone. In the days that followed, the group had a few days of peace. When food was in short supply, they would take a boat to the shore to gather supplies. Though they still encountered the occasional zombie, Hibiki and Kane had become more adept at working together, and each time, they managed to escape unscathed. However, their peaceful life was soon disrupted. While patrolling the island, Haru discovered a kayak and realized someone had infiltrated the island. Hiro was crouching, observing his surroundings, when suddenly a knife was pressed against his neck. That kayak belonged to Hiro, and he had ended up on the island by pure chance. He was quickly captured by Suboy's men and locked in a room. Hibiki stared at Hiro. He had seen him at the military base before. That meant Hiro had joined the base, which confused everyone. Daiki, Hiro's superior, had been killed by the base's people. Why would Hiro still join them? But Hiro's first words were, "Give up this island. The military base will be looking for me soon." Before Hiro could finish, Hibiki walked up and gave him a punch. He was deeply disappointed in Hiro and said, "Do you know what kind of person Shudo is? He's the one who killed my mother, and now you're working for him." Hibiki added, "If anyone dares to hurt my companions, whether women or children, I'll kill them all." Before walking away without looking back, what Hibiki didn't expect was that not long after, someone would harm his companions. While Shoko was digging wild vegetables on the island, a gunshot rang out, hitting her arm. The shooter was from the military base. Kene quickly grabbed her bow and aimed an arrow at the man. Although she was still not very skilled in archery, having learned from Hibiki, she managed to graze the man's leg. It turned out the soldiers from the base had really come to find Hiro, and Kurumi was with them. Kene quickly helped Shoko back into the house. Hibiki rushed over. At this moment, wasn't Suboy's group supposed to be on patrol? How could this be happening? As he ran outside, he saw Suboy preparing to leave. It turned out that the clever Suboy had already evacuated all of his companions when Hiro was captured. He and Haru were the last to leave. After saying that, Suboy left without looking back, leaving Hibiki with a bewildered expression. Hibiki wasn't sure how many enemies were out there, but he was determined to protect his companions. So, he started setting up obstacles. As night fell, the soldiers from the base indeed appeared outside and began shouting for the people inside to lay down their weapons and surrender. When there was no response, they prepared to charge in. At that moment, Yohei and Kene emerged, holding Hiro as a hostage. The soldiers lowered their weapons, and Kurumi watched the scene from a high point. Meanwhile, Hibiki managed to sneak behind Kurumi. Looking at her back, Hibiki didn't recognize her at first. He shouted, "Don't move! If you dare to move, I'll release the arrow." Kurumi froze, the voice sounding so familiar to her. She already knew who it was. Overjoyed, she turned around. However, just then, Hibiki's hand trembled. He released the arrow, and only after it had been shot did he realize that the person in front of him was his girlfriend. But it was too late. Hibiki walked up, disbelieving. As he looked at the face he had longed for, he suddenly felt at a loss. Omazaki rushed over to check on Kurumi and urged Hibiki to take her somewhere else to treat her. There might still be hope for her. On the other side, the soldiers and Kene were still in a standoff. Suddenly, Hibiki emerged, holding Kurumi in his arms. Seeing that Kurumi was injured, the group paused the conflict, and the soldiers quickly took Kurumi to the base for treatment. Fortunately, Hibiki had shot her in the right chest, and the doctor was able to save her life. Meanwhile, the people on the island gathered around the injured Shoko. At that moment, they realized that the woman they had seen earlier was the girlfriend Hibiki had been searching for all along. Hibiki, however, was left alone, consumed by his grief. A few days later, one of the soldiers who had come with Kurumi, a sergeant, arrived on the island. When he saw Hibiki and the others in a defensive stance, Kurumi lowered her gun and raised her hands in surrender. It turned out that after taking Kurumi back, Rikuto had realized that Hibiki and the others didn't seem like terrorists but just ordinary civilians. So, he decided to investigate the truth but ended up getting himself in trouble. Rikuto had just discovered that Shudo was behind everything when Shudo arrived with his man, accusing Rikuto of a disciplinary violation and intending to arrest him. Realizing the danger, Rikuto jumped off a balcony and escaped. At that moment, he felt deeply guilty. As someone responsible for protecting the citizens, he had mistakenly thought they were terrorists, so he apologized to everyone. Rikuto then mentioned that Kurumi had passed the critical period, and only then did Hibiki feel his anxiety subside. Rikuto continued, talking about Kurumi. After rescuing her from the bus, they discovered she was a trainee doctor. Kurumi had been working under Shudo ever since, but one day, Shudo noticed that Kurumi seemed to have antibodies to the virus. He began frequently drawing her blood for experiments, claiming it was for vaccine research to keep her close. Rikuto admitted that the base was now completely under Shudo's control. Everyone pinned their hopes on the vaccine, so no one noticed Shudo's true intentions. Omazaki, however, had a different opinion. He believed Shudo was not working on a vaccine at all. His goal was to advance his own agenda, using the vaccine as bait to manipulate everyone. Kurumi was just one of the many people Shudo was controlling. Hibiki's heart sank when he heard this. He went to the room where Hiro was being held and untied him, but Hiro grabbed Hibiki and said, "If you want to save Kurumi, I can cooperate with you." But before Hibiki could respond to Hiro, the news of Shoko's worsening injuries arrived. It turned out that Shoko's gunshot wound had caused an infection, leading to sepsis. She needed antibiotics, but only the base had them. The group came up with a plan. Rikuto still had some connections at the base. He used a radio to contact the soldiers there and arranged for a supply of antibiotics to be brought to the dock behind the base the next day. Hibiki added, "Bring along a medical expert." That medical expert, of course, was Kurumi. This way, they could get the medicine and rescue Kurumi in one move. A perfect plan. The next day, after Hibiki got the medicine, he extended his hand towards Kurumi. Kurumi hesitated for a moment, but then suddenly grabbed a handgun. The bullet grazed Hibiki's cheek, leaving him in shock as he stared at her in disbelief. Kurumi's words cut deep, like a knife, every sentence piercing Hibiki's heart. The gunshot attracted nearby zombies, and in the ensuing panic, everyone had to retreat. Hibiki, unwilling to give up, grabbed Kurumi's hand, but she coldly shook him off. It seemed that Kurumi had been completely brainwashed by Shudo. Back at Tsurushima, Hibiki was consumed by endless self-doubt and anxiety. Shoko, with the medicine, began to recover slowly. At this time, a piece of good news came through the radio. A new shelter called House of Hope had emerged. Although the group had lost faith in shelters, they decided to take the risk for the sake of food and medical supplies. But Hibiki couldn't let go of Kurumi. In the middle of the night, while everyone else was asleep, he took up his weapon and left alone. To his surprise, Hiro was waiting outside. He had already guessed Hibiki would leave and go after Kurumi. Hiro liked Kurumi too, but he decided to save her in his own way. The sun had risen, and today, the military base looked strangely abandoned. Not a single guard was in sight. The ground was littered with soldiers' bodies, most of whom had turned into zombies. Some were freshly bitten. The entire base was in chaos. Had the base been overrun during the night? Worried about Kurumi's safety, Hibiki stormed into the deepest part of the research building, but he was careless. A surviving soldier spotted him. The soldier locked Hibiki in a cell and then notified Shudo, hoping to secure a vaccine for himself. Shudo thanked the soldier and assured him, "As long as there's a vaccine, you won't be infected." Once the soldier left, Shudo smiled. The vaccine idea was perfect. He could control people however he wanted. He planned to kill Hibiki immediately. Meanwhile, Shudo finally revealed the truth to Kurumi. It turned out that the precious cryogenic device Shudo valued so much was not, as everyone had assumed, for developing a vaccine, but rather a human corpse. The body was Shudo's wife. He had created the zombie virus in an attempt to bring his wife back to life. It was clear that Shudo's obsession had driven him mad. Soon, the soldier brought Hibiki to Shudo. However, By then, Shudo had completely lost his sanity. He shot the soldier dead and threw a dagger at Hibiki. At the same time, Kurumi appeared, holding a knife in her hand as well. Shudo wanted to see them kill each other. Hibiki refused to believe that Kurumi could be so heartless. He threw down his weapon and knelt on the ground, telling Kurumi to kill him if she wanted. Under Shudo's orders, Kurumi raised the knife in her hand. However, at that moment, the ring on her necklace slipped off and fell, causing her to halt her movements. The knife slipped from her hand. Hibiki quickly stood up and pulled Kurumi into his arms. He knew she would never harm him. Instead of witnessing the scene he had imagined of them killing each other, Shudo saw their bond strengthen. Furious, he trembled with rage. Then, he shot and broke the fire hose, and red blood sprayed out from inside. The blood splattered all over Hibiki and Kurumi. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the hallway. The scent of blood attracted a large number of zombies, and soon, they reached the door. Shuto, feeling that killing them would be too easy, decided to let the zombies tear them apart instead. Glass shattered, and the zombies desperately pushed their way through, quickly breaking into the room. By this point, Hibiki and Kurumi had no time to escape. They held each other tightly. As the zombies neared, they seemed to have resigned themselves to their fate. But in the next second, Hiro, Rikuto, Suboy, and the others arrived, quickly dispatching the zombies. It turned out that on the night Hibiki left, Hiro had said he would save Kurumi in his own way, and this was his way. Hiro had found Suboy and requested help, with the promise of weapons from the military base in return. They hadn't anticipated that there would be no soldiers left at the base, which allowed them to successfully reach the building. Yohei and Kane also arrived, and seeing them, Hibiki felt warmth in his heart. Meanwhile, Shudo had fled with his wife's body, but just then, an unexpected turn of events occurred as zombies suddenly charged out from the side. Shudo fired twice, but he was still bitten on the leg by a zombie. He then shot the zombie in the head, killing it, but due to the bite, Shudo didn't get far before collapsing to the ground. Hibiki and the others caught up with him. When Shudo tried to shoot, he realized there were no more bullets left in the gun. Hibiki pinned Shudo down, ready to strangle him and end it all. But in the end, Hibiki couldn't bring himself to do it. He wasn't like Shudo. Though Hibiki didn't kill him, Shudo had already been infected with the virus, and soon, he mutated. Seeing this, Hibiki chose to shoot Shudo, granting him a merciful end. In the end, everyone returned to Sarashima. Hibiki and Kurumi began a happy life on the island.